It has become known as the modern-day black gold rush, and it's happening right here in Canada. The Alberta tar sands are the driving force behind our country attaining world energy superpower status. We have become known as the Saudi Arabia of the North, and for good reason. Experts have estimated that Alberta's reserves, though mostly unproven, could hit at least 2 trillion barrels. That's 8 times as big as the reserves estimated in Saudi Arabia. And just to put that in perspective, these oil sands are buried under forests the size of the entire state of Florida. It's a devastating project environmentally, but many believe that prosperity comes with a heavy price. Alberta's oil sands are also commonly known as tar sands. Essentially, these sands are a naturally occurring mixture of clay, sand, water, and a black viscous form of oil called bitumen. The process to transfer this oil-rich bitumen from the ground to our vehicles' gas tanks is rather long, dirty, and expensive. The key here is that since the oil is in bituminous form and is not simply found in underground pockets, it needs to be processed and refined before being commercially distributed as fuels. There are 2 principal techniques used in Alberta to extract the bitumen from the ground: open pit mining and in situ recovery. Open pit mining is essentially a truck and shovel operation. It requires a great amount of space, and sometimes it is even necessary to cut down trees to dig these monstrous holes. It was introduced back in the 1990s because it was an efficient and cost-effective method to get to the oil. Open pit mines are mostly employed where thick oil deposits occur near the Earth's surface. After excavating a large pit, huge trucks carry tons of tar sands and transport them to an extraction plant. There, hot water is poured in to separate the bitumen from the sand, water, and other minerals. Then the resulting watery mixture is agitated, releasing bitumen from the oil sand. After further processing, all residual water and minerals are removed and eventually dumped into dikes or tailings ponds. The resulting bitumen, on the other hand, gets converted into synthetic crude oil in a refinery. The other technique used in Alberta is called in situ recovery. Open pit mining becomes less viable when the bitumen is too deep in the ground, and so this is why it would be a more effective option. In fact, this occurs about 80% of the time with Alberta's tar sands. The recovery starts with an injection of steam into the oil deposit using drilling technology. This is done in order to heat the oil sand and ultimately melt the bitumen to lower its viscosity and make it easier to transport through pipelines. By doing this, the bitumen rises up to the surface while the sand remains in place. This is where the name originates from, as in situ is Latin for in place. However, the bitumen is still not clean enough to be used as part of our daily fuel consumption and requires additional refining so it can be converted, just like in the case of open pit mining, into synthetic crude oil. However, the in situ technique also faces a fair deal of challenges. The necessary technology is very expensive, the recovery process is not guaranteed to be completely efficient, and very specific conditions are required, like having a nearby water source. In situ recovery currently rivals the production from open pit mining, but as research grows in the near future, we may well see this technique replace mining as the primary source to produce the bitumen extracted from the oil sands. However, what we have completely ignored to mention thus far is the devastating environmental impacts of both of these techniques, which for now seem inevitable unless cleaner technologies are soon developed. But that's the reality when short-term greed outweighs long-term interests.
The Alberta tar sands have extracted over 173 billion barrels of oil and have over $150 billion in committed capital investment. These same oil sands, located around Fort McMurray in Alberta, are today considered as one of the largest industrial projects on our planet. Throughout the entire year, 24 hours a day, vehicles move across a vast territory, extracting oil from the sands. There is so much to dig and even more money to be made. These oil sands have been in the ground for millions of years, but for decades, prospectors lost millions of dollars trying to squeeze the oil out of the sand itself. It simply was too costly of an operation at that point in time. However, the oil industry has become huge in recent years, and it's characterized by monstrosities. From gigantic oil pumps to the vehicles being driven around resembling prehistoric beasts, it has become so ridiculous that Alberta is now the proud owner of the world's largest truck. It measures up to 3 stories high and costs $5 million. It has the capacity to carry a load of 400 tons, which means that at today's oil prices, each load is actually worth $10,000. When Brian Jean, the representative of Fort McMurray, Athabasca in Canada's Parliament, was asked if this project is comparable to a gold rush, he had to say, "I think it's bigger than a gold rush. We're expecting $100 billion over the next 10 years to be invested in this area. $100 billion in a population that currently is 70,000 people." Not only is this project supporting the small population of Fort McMurray, according to Prime Minister Harper, they have become the new backbone of the Canadian economy. Harper has made this statement very clear by permitting his government to loan more than $1.2 billion towards oil sands projects to this date. In addition, tax write-offs for property and pre-development costs are more generous concerning tar sands projects than they are for conventional oil operations. The tar sands statistics demonstrate just how large of an impact they have on our economy. They promote 24,000 direct and indirect jobs across the country, and in 2008, an $18 billion capital investment was made in the tar sands project. In addition, it also goes without mentioning that in 2004, Canada had become the leading exporter of oil and natural gas to the United States, surpassing Saudi Arabia. Given the fact that oil prices are skyrocketing and the US's demand for more oil in the future will rise, Canada's economy will more than likely be driven by the tar sands. This is only helped by the fact that there are still at least 2 trillion barrels of oil waiting to be located and extracted in Fort McMurray. The United States, one of the largest oil consumers in the world, will have no trouble looking to their neighbors of the north to continue to constantly supply them with this important resource. The fact that the tar sands are viewed as Canada's economic engine is truly an accomplishment for them. However, that being said, is the ecological nightmare that the tar sands are creating worth this extremely high-powered engine?
The people of Alberta understand that they live just beside a buried treasure that seems too good to give up on. It is certainly the root of our biggest economic boom since the gold rush, which makes it so attractive to our economy. We also cannot forget that we all benefit from the oil every day, and experts say that without this gas being produced, half of Canada's vehicles would not be able to run. On the other side of this coin is a looming catastrophe, according to author William Marsden, who says that Alberta is bringing environmental Armageddon to Canada. The tar sands are now Canada's single largest source of carbon dioxide and many other greenhouse gases. The tar sands in Alberta alone are causing us a present-day environmental nightmare and are probably the singular cause for Canada not being able to meet the targets set out by the Kyoto Protocol for reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Alberta's oil sands take up and pollute large quantities of water and are a serious health hazard for people not only living in the Alberta area, but the rest of Canada too. When oil companies are producing barrels of oil every day, they require great amounts of water, 2 to 5 barrels specifically, to produce each barrel of oil. In Alberta, the Athabasca River has predominantly been suffering from this loss of water, and for many years the government has neglected the situation. But we interviewed Dr. Preston McEachran, Section Head for Science Research and Innovation at Alberta Environment in the Oil Sands Division. According to him, this issue has been blown up significantly and is not as devastating as it has been made to sound.
Right now, a good example over the last couple of years, actually start as far back as 2002. We were involved in a full-on multi-stakeholder group that was addressing this issue of how much water would be safe to take from the Athabasca River. And we developed a Phase 1 water management framework, which basically sets limits on how much water can come out of the Athabasca River on a weekly basis. And I can tell you, because I'm intimately involved in that process, which is now going towards Phase 2, that it is the most protective water management framework for a river like this in the world.
Specifically, the tar sands remove as much water from the river as a city of 2 million people would. And in reality, the river is not only the common source of water for most oil companies in Alberta, but is also expected to fill the needs of the community at the same time. Another serious matter relates to water pollution caused by the production of oil from the tar sands. When bitumen is extracted from the ground, it goes through an intense processing and cleaning procedure before being commercially used. However, all the wastewater made up of the sands, clay, and other toxic materials is obviously not reusable. Unfortunately, the result of this is large tailings ponds or dikes that will take in this pollution. These man-made pools represent an external cost of the mining process and are often considered in the cases of such mining projects required in the tar sands industry as the most significant environmental liability. Essentially, they will store the tailings until sedimentation is completed. Now, from the air, these may look like lakes, but when closer to the ponds, it becomes a lot clearer that they serve no other purposes and truthfully are disgusting to look at. These toxic ponds can vary in size, but combined take up over 214 square kilometers of land, and at this rate, we could double this waste production by the year 2020 if nothing is done to limit this devastating impact. Last April, more than 500 migratory ducks landed on the toxic Syncrude tailings pond, and given that the tailings pond is dyed a shade of green, the ducks thought they were landing on a grassy area. The tar sands lie along a major pathway for migrating birds. However, these developments clearly contradict the Migratory Birds Convention Act. But the real question is, since this was really the first accident to be widely reported, how many have gone unreported in the past? Although ducks may not be the most important reason to stop the tar sands, what really should be troubling people is that we are making other species suffer for our personal benefit. But really, we should be considering ourselves an equal part of biodiversity to any other species on this planet. Essentially, this incident is a grave warning to all living creatures, including humans. Dr. McEachran assures that measures have been taken since this incident occurred.
What I can say with respect to that sort of thing is that we are now marching down the pathway of attempting to vastly reduce the number and size of tailings ponds. We put into place a policy just last fall to do so. You would have heard of it maybe as ERCV Directive 074, but anyway, moving forward from there, this is going to vastly reduce the size and number of tailings ponds on the landscape. We are extending beyond that to new regulatory directions, enhancing that to hopefully and eventually eliminate them. And to do so, of course, there requires a lot of technology development.
In terms of health, the oil sands in Alberta have been linked to numerous cases of cancer and other deadly diseases in local population. One example of a serious disease outbreak in a specific region in Alberta has been noted in the small town of Fort Chipewyan. This town of 1,200 people is located 300 kilometers above the Athabasca River and uses the river as its primary source for consuming water in the community. The problem is that certain oil companies have been permitted by the Ministry of the Environment in Alberta to dump large amounts of chemicals every year. To be specific, they have dumped arsenic into the river for many years now, and when this chemical combined with another toxic liquid produced by petroleum called benzene, a person's DNA is dissolved, leaving them more vulnerable to develop various forms of cancer. Recently, many residents have been diagnosed with diseases including leukemia, lymphomas, and cholangiocarcinoma. The scariest part is that this last disease, cholangiocarcinoma, is normally only supposed to appear once in every 100,000 people or so. In the last few years, at least 5 local residents have been diagnosed with it. So this is quickly becoming an increasingly more serious health hazard that has local physicians searching for answers and people scared for their lives. With all the impacts discussed, it is certainly clear that the environmental nightmare caused by the tar sands outweighs all economic benefits garnered by this industry. For years now, people have been calling for changes, and the government in Alberta has simply downplayed all of these significant consequences. They have taken so long to finally take action and ensure more rigid regulations in the tar sand industry that it may be too late to completely stop this environmental damage. But even if the impact of the tar sands cannot be completely eliminated, it is working on becoming more sustainable in the future.
By the year of 2015, the tar sands are estimated to quadruple their production based on current production levels. This is due to the United States' constant hunger for oil. According to the World Resources Institute in the United States, greenhouse gas emissions from the tar sands could soon match the annual output of emissions from European countries like the Czech Republic. In addition, the oil sands could emit twice that of Peru's output, 3 times that of Qatar's, and 10 times as much as Costa Rica. With those facts in hand, it is hard to believe that one day this project could become truly eco-friendly. The question is, can the tar sands in Alberta ever be considered a sustainable industry? In all fairness to this mega project, the government has made several efforts to help the environmental situation in recent years. Specifically, last June, Alberta Premier Ed Stelmach announced his plan to deal with carbon dioxide emissions caused by the tar sands. This plan consisted most notably of the development of a certain technology that captures carbon dioxide and stores it beneath the ground at a heavy cost of $1.5 billion. By 2015, Alberta is hoping to capture 5 million tons of carbon dioxide. By 2020, according to the plan, the province's carbon emissions will level off to the previous years, and by 2050, they will decline to 15% below their 2005 levels. As mentioned before, this is a notable effort by the community who supported the tar sands. But as our interviewee Preston McEachern explained, a lot of work is being done unnoticed in Alberta to improve sustainability.
There's been a lot that has occurred over the last decade with respect to environmental sustainability or efficiency. For example, most people don't know this, but the water use for the mines has actually increased in its efficiency. In other words, they're using less water per unit of production. Again, same thing with air, where we're continuously improving and requiring companies to install new technology, better technology to minimize their emissions, constantly pushing the envelope on the quantity, the mass loading that they're allowed to put out.
However, these attempts would only solve short-term issues. Unfortunately, the tar sands emissions have caused such a setback to our planet that they are past the option of a short-term patch-up. According to environmentalists and many local Albertans, the giants who helped grow the tar sands industry need to reach into their very full pockets and fix the mess they have caused. Luckily, the tar sands are situated in Alberta, which is one of the windiest and sunniest settings in Canada. Those two characteristics are tremendously favorable for basing renewable energy sources, which could have a major impact towards reducing Alberta's monstrous environmental footprint. If scientists could devise a plan that would involve using the advantages of Alberta's windy and sunny climate, they could potentially patch up this problem using a more long-term outlook, as opposed to the government's more short-term efforts thus far. Even better, imagine if it became possible with new cleaner technologies to literally extract the bitumen from the ground directly using these renewable energy sources. That would ultimately solve all of these issues. The fortunate aspect of all of this is that if any of Canada's provinces were to come up with such an advanced technology, it would probably start in Alberta. They have the climate and the scientific know-how with experts working there to develop viable solutions that could potentially eliminate the need for the tar sands. It would be a huge sacrifice, but if this worldwide project needed to change some of its more traditional procedures, then it would need to be done in order to make things better in the long run. Many would argue that the renewable energy sources would not only produce a different form of energy than what the tar sands supplied to the world, but the scale of production of each is worlds apart. Fortunately, for the Alberta Environment Ministry, the money has continuously been flowing in. This can be reflected by the success of the tar sands. However, if they were to accept the change in their system, it would be only if they were assured that the solid income of the tar sands would continue to prosper. The future of the tar sands is fairly unpredictable, as no one truly knows whether or not this modern-day black gold rush will benefit humanity in years to come. However, presently, one thing is for certain. The Alberta tar sands project is a two-edged sword. It has seriously impacted the economy of Canada, and the world for that matter, in a positive manner. Yet, this has all come at a dangerous cost, in terms of it being one of the largest sources of pollution on our planet. Only time will tell whether or not this project is proven to be, as some are claiming, a moral problem or the solution to all of our problems.